Hello and welcome into this week's edition of the NASCAR Xfinity Series Rewind Show right here on Racing News Now. As always, I'm your host Garth Allen. Thank you once again for joining me today. If this is your first time catching a Racing News Now video, consider going down below and hitting that subscribe button and ringing the bell for notifications so you don't miss a thing going forward from Racing News Now. This is a channel where we discuss lots of motorsports, namely NASCAR, ARCA, IndyCar, and Formula One. We do plan to broaden that scope eventually, but for now, that's what we cover. So in today's edition of the Xfinity Series Rewind Show, we're looking back at last night's 18th annual Alsco 300 from the Kentucky Speedway, Sparta, Kentucky. 200 laps, 300 miles around this 1.5 mile oval. And we'll start off, as we always do, with the caution flag. 7 for 32 laps last night. Nothing for an incident until Stage 3. Stage number 1 concluded lap number 45 with Kyle Busch taking the stage victory. Stage number 2 ended at lap 90. So your stage winner for Stage 2 would be John Hunter Nemechek. Stage 3 was where things got a little hairy in terms of incidents. First caution for an incident was at lap 101 as the 78 car Blake Jones spun in turn number 4. Then they came hot and heavy after that. Lap 105, Brandon Jones had his incident on the backstretch. Lap 133, Ty Majeski, who was in the 60 car this week, spun in turn number 4. Lap 148, Elliott Sadler and Matt Tifft get together in turn number 2. And the final caution for the night, lap 163 of 200. Joey Gase backed it into the wall in turn number 3. Well, we had a few lap leaders on the night. Kyle Busch led the most laps with 111, but some significant numbers out of some others as well. 32 laps led by Justin Allgaier, 17 from Christopher Bell, 14 from Cole Custer, 14 as well from John Hunter Nemechek, 8 laps led by Daniel Hemric, and 4 laps led by Michael Annett. Now, as we see, Kyle Busch did lead the most laps on the night, but as we will see as we get into the results now, Kyle Busch did not win this race. Christopher Bell won this race, and Daniel Hemric even came in second. I don't want to hear any more of this talk about, oh, Cup drivers ruin the Xfinity races. Last night proved that that is not the case. Sure, most of the time when Kyle Busch comes into the Xfinity Series, he runs away with it, nobody can even touch him. That was not the case last night. Just because there are Cup drivers in the field does not mean the conversation flips to who's going to run second. There are guys in this Xfinity field that can outrun Cup guys, and that is the point of Cup guys being in these races. You want these young guys to be able to prove that they can outrun these top guys in the sport like Kyle Busch, like Brad Keselowski, like Joey Logano. You want them to be able to prove they can do that. And we had 3 guys, 3 Xfinity Series regulars last night that proved they could outrun Kyle Busch. Sure, Kyle Busch ended up in front of Justin Allgaier at the end of the race because Allgaier's car really fell off there at the end. But both Christopher Bell and Daniel Hemric outran Kyle Busch last night and proved they can run with Kyle Busch and proved they have the talent to deserve a Cup Series ride. And that is why Cup regulars, that's why I do not have a problem with Cup regulars being in the Xfinity races, because it gives these Xfinity guys an opportunity to prove, hey, I have the talent to be able to run in the Cup Series. You don't get that when Cup regulars aren't in the field. If Kyle Busch wasn't in this race, sure, we would have still had a great race between Christopher Bell and Daniel Hemric, but it wouldn't have quite been as fulfilling because Christopher Bell didn't beat Kyle Busch. Daniel Hemric didn't beat Kyle Busch. So we're saying, okay, these guys are good, but how good are they really? Can they compete in the Cup Series? Or are they just good against each other? We know now they can beat Kyle Busch. We know that they are good enough to be in the Cup Series. That's why Cup regulars should be allowed to be in the Xfinity field, because it proves without a shadow of a doubt these guys have a talent and these guys should be in the Cup Series. You don't get that if Kyle Busch isn't in this race. So anyway, getting back into the results here, as we see Christopher Bell, Daniel Hemric, and Kyle Busch, as we said, were your top three. Justin Allgaier, like I said, was up there leading for a lot at the end of the race, then his car fell off, and he ended up falling back to fourth. Cole Custer rounds out the top five. Rest of your top 10, Tyler Reddick, John Hunter Nemechek, Ryan Reed, Paul Menard in the 22 this week, and Austin Cindric in the 12 this week for Team Penske. 11th through 20th, Matt Tiff there in 11th, Elliott Sadler 12th, Ryan Truex 13th. The other Cup regular in the field, Ty Dillon in 14th. Michael Annett fell into the 15th position. Spencer Gallagher made his return to the Xfinity Series this week and came home with a 20th place finish. 21st through 30th, Ty Majeski, we talked about his problems late in the race. He came home 7 laps down in the 27th position. And 31st through 40th, we also talked about Brandon Jones' problems. He was out after his incident and came home in the 36th position on the night. Alright, so that's your results from the Alsco 300. Now let's head over to the Media Center and we'll see what first, second, and fourth had to say last night, that being Justin Allgaier, Daniel Hemric, and Christopher Bell.
I hope so. I know if I was sitting at home watching, it would have been a heck of a race to watch. It's a lot of fun from my perspective, especially having a shot there at the end. I wish I would have maybe done a couple things on my end differently to execute to give my guys a win, but I thought the racing was really good considering the repave and how we struggled the race, but it was good to see comers and goers throughout the day at times, at least. That was from my point of view. Danny Stockton did a great job on our South Bend Hotel Casino Chevrolet to give us an opportunity to get better and better. And I mean, we made wholesale changes. I think we were about a 15th place car there the first run or two, so it was good to see us make the turn and get our race car that competitive by the end of the race. And so disappointed myself for not doing my job the way I needed to, but hopefully the fans enjoyed the show.
I think from my end, obviously as Daniel said, it was fun to have a shot there at the end. I think you passed me on the first run of the race, and if you thought you were 15th, we were really struggling early on. Just disappointed. We felt like yesterday in practice, we felt like the long run was where we were really good. And obviously things change when the sun goes down, but we fought some things tonight in the race that we didn't yesterday in practice. And I think that was the most disappointing part, for us. But as Daniel said, our guys did a great job. They made great pit calls. Had awesome pit stops. I think that was the biggest difference maker for us. And having Dale Jr.'s Whiskey River on the car this week, obviously we wanted to try to go to victory lane with it, first time being on the race car, but still a good showing and led some laps and battled it out with these guys. It's always fun. I mean, all the competitors right now that are running for points, and even Kyle tonight and John Hunter. We got a lot of really talented, really fun race car drivers to race around, and I think that's what makes this series so much fun. So just came up short tonight. I think we definitely didn't have a car to win the race, but we persevered through a lot of things and put ourselves in good position.
Well, at these style racetracks with the repaves and really narrow like it is, the air is so important. And yesterday in practice, our car was really good, and I felt like we had a car capable of competing for the win. And then I made that mistake in qualifying, and I kept telling myself that if my car's not driving good at the beginning of the race, don't freak out. And then whenever we started, I was really loose, and I was really nervous because I felt like once we got in clean air, I was just going to go looser. But, Jason does an awesome job, and our entire Ream team does an excellent job at executing. And by the time we got up to the front, we were driving as good as anybody and had a car that was able to compete for the win.
All right, so let's look at the playoff grid before wrapping up here tonight. And as you can see, Christopher Bell now moves back to the top of the playoff grid with his second win of the season, third career Xfinity Series victory last night in Kentucky. Nothing else really changing except down below the cutoff line. You see Kaz Gralla not there anymore as he was not in the race last night, so that drops him down to 17th on the playoff grid and not on the graphic. That does move Garrett Smithley onto the graphic, although he is over 100 points back. Really, again, Ryan Sieg, Michael Annett, the only ones there really, I think, with a chance to point their way in. We'll see if they can, but I think they're the only ones with a chance to point their way in at this point. And unfortunately, I've been talking every week up until now that Kaz Gralla is probably the one with the best chance to point his way, or to win his way into the playoffs that's not in it already. And unfortunately, with him not being in Kentucky last night, that takes him out of playoff eligibility because he has not attempted to start every race. So, that throws that out the window. And really now, Michael Annett and Ryan Sieg are really the guys I'm looking at as probably the only guys outside the playoffs currently that have a chance to get in. So, and I think really Ross Chastain is probably the only person they have a chance to displace. So I'm looking at this 3-car battle here right now, and that's really what we're going to look at going down the stretch, is this battle for 12th between Ross Chastain, Michael Annett, and Ryan Sieg, because I think that's really the battle right now in terms of who gets into the playoffs and who doesn't. Again, we could have another surprise winner like we did last year, Jeremy Clements at Road America. It's not out of the question, but I'm not expecting it either. So we'll see how all of that plays out, but really nothing else has changed here on the playoff grid except for Elliott Sadler, Daniel Hemric, and Cole Custer. They don't even need a win at this point. I mean, they are so good on points that they would have to crash. They would literally have to crash in pretty much every race going forward to not be in the playoffs. And even at that point, all three of them are good enough to win a race, even if they had a string of bad luck like that. If they could keep one race without the bad luck and win, they could still get in. So I don't think we have to worry about those three. And to be honest, I don't think we have to worry about anybody here from Brandon Jones to Ryan Reed. Ross Chastain's the only one I'm looking at in on points right now that has, I think, a possibility of falling out at this point. We'll see how that works out going forward. So I think that'll do it for today's edition of the NASCAR Xfinity Series Rewind show. We still have a few shows coming up this weekend. We'll have a Monster Energy NASCAR Cup Series Rewind and an ARCA Rewind coming up on Sunday. Cup from Kentucky and ARCA from Alsco, so you want to look out for that tomorrow. As well as pole position as usual, Monday night, 8 p.m., recapping everything from Kentucky, Alsco, and IndyCar from Toronto on Sunday. So as usual, you'll want to stick around for that. And if you haven't done it already, you need to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications so you know exactly when all that comes out and you can stay informed on everything. And if you haven't done it already, hit that big thumbs up button if you like the video. It's much appreciated when you do. So at that, this has been the NASCAR Xfinity Series Rewind show. I'm Garth Allen for Racing News Now.